board development, and we talked about this succession planning. So could you weigh in on your thoughts on these? Let's start with succession planning.
Yeah.
How important is that? Well, we know how important it is, but what are the things that we can do? You know, there are institutions here that have a staff as small as many of us, 3 or 4 or 5, and everyone wears all those hats.
Exactly.
So how do you turn it over? What are the things that need to be done?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think these are important and real issues because they all are about sustainability, right? Very specifically, what is the possibility for our institutions not simply to survive, right, but to truly thrive? And to grow. And I don't mean just in scale, because sometimes I think there's a sort of false dichotomy around this idea of growth, right? That we're always supposed to be moving towards bigger and larger, and that isn't always our best place. But I think that the issue of succession is significant, and it's related to board as well, because I think it has to be built in to an institution's ethos, that it is looking at itself not just in the present, but the future. So that succession becomes a sort of almost mission-related idea. You know, I feel very privileged to be director of the museum now, but I became director after being the chief curator for 5 years, right? Which allowed for any number of ways in which we could think about not just those immediate 5 years, but the 5 years beyond, and then quite potentially the years beyond me. Right? And that is ongoing thought. I also think it's a practical issue, right? I think it's a super practical issue that none of our institutions should be dependent on one person. It's not a good way to think about the future. You know, the Studio Museum, I obviously represent the Studio Museum because I'm the director, but the Studio Museum is really run by its team. And I want to take this moment and ask that little table there to stand up, which is my Studio Museum team, who are here.
Excellent.
Right? So, to contradict what I just said, you know, the museum's run by, you know, other people, so I'm wondering who's running the museum now, right? Because they're sitting there, and, you know, quite specifically, I also think that what happens in our institutions, we have to think about what roles mean. So I say it all the time, and she's going to be mad at me now, but I'm really going to single out my deputy director, Sheila McDaniel, who really runs the Studio Museum, okay? And I know all of you are museum people, so you know what I'm talking about, right? So that, you know, the first text I got this morning was from her about something happening at the museum. I hadn't thought about the museum in hours, you know? I was good, right? But Sheila is thinking about the museum 24/7, like in its tick-tock day-to-day work.
Absolutely.
So I think succession is also about the way in which we form our institutional teams so that we can move forward.